Before we start modeling, you need to turn on a few add-ons that are off by default in Blender. Go to Edit, Preferences. Then go into the Input tab. Here you want to turn on Emulate 3-button mouse. After this, go into the Key Map tab. Here you want to turn on Tab for Pie Menu, as well as Extra Shading Pie Menu items. And finally, in Add-ons, turn on Add Mesh Extra Objects. You can find and enable this by typing in the name in this field here. Enabling these is going to make your workflow much easier and faster. After that, click here and save preferences. Okay, now let's run through some Blender basics for those of you that are complete beginners. If you're not a beginner, feel free to skip this part. To rotate around your object, you use the middle mouse button. You zoom in and out with the wheel of your mouse. If you press Shift, middle mouse button, you can pan around your scene. Now I'll do a quick shortcut demo. I won't be demonstrating all of them because Blender has endless amounts of shortcuts, but I'll show you the ones that we need. You press G to grab your object and move it around your scene. You press S and drag your mouse to scale your object up and down. You press R to rotate your object. If you press X, Y, or Z after pressing R, you can constrain the rotation of the object to only one axis. For example, here I press R and then X, so the cube only rotates in the X axis. Then, if I press Y, it rotates only in the Y axis. And if I press Z, it rotates in the Z axis. You can do the same thing when moving or scaling your objects. Next, I want to show you Edit and Object mode. Currently, we're in Object mode. To go into Edit mode, press Tab and here choose Edit mode. In Edit mode is where we adjust the shape of our object. Here you can edit the individual vertices, edges, and faces of your model. If you press 1 while in Edit mode, you enter Vertice Selection mode. All of these little points here are called vertices. You can select a vertex and use G to move it around. If you press 2 while in Edit mode, you enter Edge Selection mode. Now you can select edges. This is an edge here. It is the line between two vertices. Here you can press G to move the edge, S to scale it, or R to rotate it. If you want to undo at any point, you can press Ctrl Z, which undoes your last command. If you press 3 in Edit mode, you go into Face Selection mode. Faces are where 3 or more vertices meet to make a visible surface. So all of these here are faces. You can move, scale, or rotate these faces with G, S, and R as well. Next, I want to show you Sculpt mode. In Sculpt mode, you don't edit the individual vertices, edges, and faces, but instead you alter an area of the model using a brush. In this tutorial, we'll be using Sculpt mode to quickly adjust the shape of our model once we have the base. To go into Sculpt mode, press Tab and then choose Sculpt mode. Now here on the left you have a lot of sculpting brushes. We'll mainly be using the Grab, Smooth, and Inflate brushes. I just wanted to show you Sculpt mode so you know what we'll be doing later. Finally, I want to show you Blender's modifiers. I won't be demonstrating all of them as that would be a whole separate course on its own. To find the modifiers, press on this wrench tool here. This is the modifier properties. Then click on the Add Modifier box. Here you can see all the modifiers you can add to your object in Blender. Each of these does a different thing. One that we'll be using a lot in this tutorial is the Subdivision Surface modifier. Let me just quickly show you how it works. To add it to your model, just choose it from this list here. What the Subdivision Surface modifier does is it splits the existing faces into smaller faces, and in turn that makes the object smoother. At the moment, the modifier hasn't been applied, so it's only a preview. So if you go into Edit mode now, you can see that the cube is still made of 6 faces. So we essentially are just previewing the smoothing without it being applied. We have to apply the modifier if we want it to actually smooth the mesh. To apply the Subdivision Surface modifier, go into Object mode. Then from this little tick mark here next to modifier, click apply. Now the modifier has been applied to your mesh and your mesh is smoothed. You can see now when we go into edit mode, there are more faces on the object. We'll be using this throughout the tutorial to add more detail to our model, so keep it in mind for later. Okay, that concludes our quick beginner summary. I've also included a hotkeys cheat sheet in the description where you can start to familiarize yourself with the hotkeys. Keep in mind that Blender has a lot of hotkeys, but you don't need to know all of them. I'll be explaining more as we go along in the next parts of the tutorial, so don't worry if you haven't picked everything up right away. I'll explain the shortcuts and the reason behind everything so you can understand how and why we do things. So now let's start modeling.